Hello and welcome to Sideways. This week we're talking about how we pretend we're okay even when we aren't. Martin remembers a time when he had to calm me down after we'd been stopped by the police, and we discuss whether Mike Yarwood was actually any good. Doing impressions.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
No. Can you hear me?
No, can you hear me?
We've already done that one.
You've already got your guitar with you again.
You look a bit like, do you remember those, I just got to put this down. Do you remember those apps you could get for your iPhone that if you put a photo in them, they made your photo look like a painting?
Yeah, I do. I know the ones you mean, yeah.
You look like one of those today.
But yeah, well, that's quite complimentary, really.
Well,
Yeah, actually, you look like a cartoon all the time, so I don't know what you're talking about.
you look like an Edvard Munch.
Yeah. Well, the Scream, obviously, that's his most famous. Are you talking about some of his other paintings?
I don't know any of his other paintings, so don't start getting all arty-farty on me. I know about as much. I know more about Monster Munch than Edvard Munch.
Yeah, I used to like those pickled onion flavour.
I didn't like pickled onion flavour. I like the roast beef flavour, but I didn't like pickled onion flavour.
No, I like the pickled onion flavour. The only thing with Monster Munch is it used to stick to your teeth a little bit too much for my liking. Not a big fan, really.
Do you remember Cresta?
I do, yes. The drinks, the Cresta Bear.
I always used to think that Cresta made your phlegm really thick.
I'm sure that would be quite an interesting strapline they could use, couldn't they, when they're doing advertising in the future?
I'm going to Google it because I can't be the only person that found that their phlegm was thickened by Cresta.
The Cresta, I know. I just remember the taste was just glorious.
Do you remember what the strapline in the advertising was?
No.
It was.
It's frothy. No, it's frothy, man. Yes, yeah. I had to drag that one from deep.
Anyway, I can't believe you've got us off on the wrong foot again.
Well, you're not recording this. This won't go in the episode, so that's all right. We can have a little banter before it starts, I'm sure.
It definitely will go in the episode.
All right, okay. Well, I better smarten up a little bit then in that case, and smarten up my language.
Yeah. So what are we talking about today then?
Well, I wanted to call this episode Impressions.
Oh, have we got to do some?
Well, you can if you like, but I wanted to start with a quote from the new series of Afterlife.
Which is excellent.
Which is excellent, isn't it? I mean, everything Ricky Gervais does, I've tended to like, I must admit. I think it's and the new series of Afterlife is just genius still, isn't it?
Including Derek.
Not so keen on Derek, really. No, that's the only one I
like
don't.
Derek, it got a lot of it got a bit slated, didn't it? It really did. It really polarised opinion. But I really enjoyed Derek. I thought it was good.
No, I felt awkward watching that. I did.
Watching you.
Well, exactly. Well, you know how I feel then when I'm watching Derek. Anyway, the quote I want to use right from the Afterlife. It's when Ricky, he plays Tony Johnson, and they're sitting on the bench in the graveyard. You know those bits that cuts the graveyard from time to time. He's sitting there with Anne, who's played by Penelope Wilton. And it's quite a sad moment, really. And he says that people think I'm sort of okay. I'm not well, but I remember what it's like to be normal, so I do an impression of that. And I quite liked that. I thought that sentiment sort of throws up a number of issues that are sort of relevant to what we talk about. And certainly to the condition of addiction and those in recovery. Mm-hmm. Because I remember, when I was in the throes of addiction, desperately trying to do an impression of a sober person. I was sort of fervently trying to hide my condition so that I could carry on. And I think we've all done that in the past, haven't we, to a certain degree, when trying to hide the fact that we're drunk from those around us.
Definitely. Yes, I can definitely remember times when that happened. Although the time that immediately springs to my mind when you say that is a time when I came home from college one day. I was still living at home, and my mum was at home, and I'd been taking magic mushrooms, and I was
yeah. Well, I think parents are one of the first ones that we try and do an impression of being normal around, don't we? When that, because I remember lots of occasions when I had to do that around my parents, and certainly, and then it goes on. I remember doing it around my partners. Certainly, when I was married, you'd go home, wouldn't you, and say, "No, I've only had a swift one," and you're double trouble trying to focus and that sort of thing. And we're doing an impression the whole time, aren't we? We're trying to do an impression of something else that we're not. And I think that we sort of learn how to do that a lot in addiction, and we think we're doing all right, but in reality, we're not really, are we?
No, I mean, we talked about another way in which you were trying to do an impression of normality very early on in this series when we were talking about you saying, "I'm just popping up the cash point."
Yeah.
That was a pretense. That was an impression of normality, wasn't it? Because actually you were just going to the pub.
Yeah, it was. It was an impression because it's something that I sort of learned as soon as I'd started to drink and have too much, that I needed to do an impression, to do an impression of someone that hadn't had a lot to drink, and that carried on through. I think one of the joys of recovery is not having to do that anymore.
Sorry, go on.
Looking back, we're talking about doing impressions to your parents, etc. But I thought it drifted on further, and you end up trying to do impressions, to the police and stuff. I mean, do you remember? It just reminded me just saying that actually. Do you remember I think you and I were just coming home from the Royal Albion, and we were walking up the road, and we suddenly stopped by a couple of plainclothes coppers. So they started accusing us of all sorts, didn't they? Saying there had been burglaries in the area, and that they said we'd dipped into doorways, and then they proceeded to sort of search us and look through our wallets.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? I remember you got really humpy. You got really humpy with that, and I had to do an impression of a responsible adult at that time. I remember to try and get this shtuck that you were very quickly talking us into. And I
worried I was going to get us a night in the cells.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, and I'd had a couple of those already. I didn't like it, and so I had to grow up quick at that point. I had to try, and it's surprising how quickly I snapped into sobriety when I could see the danger signs.
Yeah, no, I do remember that. I think the thing that really annoyed me about that was, as you say, they'd said that there'd been some break-ins, and I think I said to them, "What are you looking through my wallet for? Some a screwdriver or something?" It's like, I don't know why they couldn't have just been honest with us and said, "Well, we think we're just going to search you, see if you've got any drugs on you."
Well, exactly, yeah. It was a sort of a spurious way of getting our cooperation, or not your cooperation in your case.
I just wanted to ask you, all those times when you felt you needed to do an impression of sobriety or normality. Do you know what it was that you were fearing would happen if you didn't pull off that impression?
Yeah, I was fearing that my parents would have said to me, "Right, I think you're drinking too much. I think we've got to put a stop to this." So
Even
right from an early age,
in those days,
even in those days, I was wary, or not wary. I was aware of the importance that alcohol was playing in my life, and the last thing I wanted would be to have that curtailed. And when you're living at home with your parents, they can call the shots to a certain extent, can't they? And it would have been very tricky. So I was on my guard from day one, really. As soon as I knew that.
Do you think you were more aware of that because of the fact that Uncle Jeff existed?
There was a heightened awareness in the family that addiction could potentially be a problem further down the line. Yeah. I do, and I know that my mum was very aware. Obviously, watching her younger brother go through the mill with addiction and eventually dying from that. I think she had a heightened awareness of what it could potentially be. So she was always warning me. "Yeah, you're going to end up like your Uncle Jeff," and this sort of thing. And it was. She didn't just say it to me. She said it to obviously my younger brother Paul and my older brother Russ as well. It was a sort of a blanket warning, really. Mm. But to me, I started to become protective of my behaviour. So, you can root it back. And I think most people, we talk about it in groups all the time, most people can root it back, when although drinking wasn't a particular problem, it started to become an important enough part of your life where you do need to be protective and start to make... Sorry?
Secretive, do you think?
secretive. Yeah, you got to start to ensure that whatever happens, you're going to be able to carry on like you wish.
Mm.
But moving that on slightly on the impressions part again, just sticking with the same theme, but moving it along a little bit. I think it's an important point that how the illness of addiction can do an impression of or to mimic other problems, especially bipolar, and with the mood swings and the manic state that we get into. It can very easily mimic bipolar, and again, this has come up so often in groups where people would go to their doctor, not admit, they're not being honest with their doctor, not admitting what their problems are,
mm-hmm.
And they end up getting, when they talk about the mood swings and the manic states they're getting into, they end up being diagnosed as being bipolar and end up with the medication to go with it. So as you can imagine, that can cause all sorts of problems. But if it was a one-off and I'd heard it once, I thought, well, that could happen. But I've heard it so often now. That we have to be aware of that, and it must be really tricky for the doctors because we never go in there and say, I'm drinking a litre of vodka a day. So the last thing you want to do, again, you do an impression of someone that's well. And I think a lot of us have done that in the past. Anyway, going into doctor, they say, "Well, does that hurt?" There, no, definitely doesn't. You do an impression. For some reason, you want to come out of there with a clean bill of health, even though you've gone in there.
Why though? Why do you think that is the case? Because I get it. When I said to you before. Why did you think it was necessary to do an impression when it's your parents? I kind of get that because, as you say, you wanted to preserve your liberty, if you like. But if you've gone to the doctor and at that point you kind of know that there's something amiss, what do you think it is? Because I know this is the case because we've spoken about it a lot. But what do you think it is that stops you from being honest with your doctor?
I think there's a fear that something's going to end up on your records that's going to be there forever. And I think that, the stigma is going to be certainly with addiction. The stigma that attaches to that. The last thing you want is to have that on your records. And so there's a fear also that of what the repercussions of admitting that there's a problem. Well, the repercussions of you go in there and you get diagnosed with something. You've got to then deal with it. It's much nicer to go back home to your partner or your husband, or your wife, or whatever, and say, no, do you know what? Everything's good, a clean bill of health, I'm okay. Where because you've gone to the doctor, gone through the mill, you've probably been pushed to go to the doctor by someone anyway, and all of a sudden you'll come back saying, no, everything's okay, and life can carry on as normal. You can carry on in your destructive manner. Yeah,
I mean, I think that makes absolute sense if someone has pushed you to go to the doctor. So if you've gone at the behest of someone else, then I think, yes, you're effectively still trying to preserve your liberty, aren't you, by coming home and saying, no, there's nothing wrong. But what do you think it is with people who've got addiction problems that enables them to ultimately be honest with people like their GP?
I think it's the last course of action available to you. You know something's wrong, and you just get to the point where something has got to happen.
Do you remember when you were honest with your GP?
Yeah.
Didn't it feel like a relief?
It felt like a relief, but he already knew. I mean, it was bizarre that he was already under that impression anyway, and he's sort of gently cajoling me towards making that admission. But yeah, it was really liberating.
The elephant in the room, wasn't it?
It was, sorry?
It was the elephant in the room.
Yeah, it very much was, and I think he was waiting for me to say something because he was already. He's already with what he wanted to do and how he's going to help me, etc. And so, yeah, it was liberating. It's freeing, and that was the first step of the getting on the road to getting better and getting well. Do you remember feeling surprised that he wasn't judging you? Yes.
Yeah.
I was very surprised that he wanted to be supportive. I couldn't believe it. I just had this impression of doctors, which has been proved wrong on more than one occasion, that I just thought they'd tick the box, give you a prescription, and off you go, and they can get through their numbers for the day. So I was quite lucky, I suppose. But I've come across other people in groups that have had similar experiences. I think addiction now, the medical profession are much more aware of what the consequences are and how they can help the whole system by getting you into recovery. It's hard. I think it is. Was you waiting for me to say something then?
Yeah.
There was a bit of a pregnant pause there, wasn't it? I know you'll edit that out, so it won't sound too bad, I'm sure.
I just thought I kind of thought I'd let you get back to your notes, because I thought, I keep asking you questions, and I know you don't like that.
No, I do quite like it, because I think it makes the conversation flow a little bit better, doesn't it? Just working off notes, it can end up sounding stilted. That's the last thing we want, isn't it? It won't sound very professional, will it?
Not really, no.
But also found that something does come up also in groups, that sometimes that people have had, they generally have had a bipolar issue, and they've been diagnosed with an addiction problem. So it can work the other way around.
Oh, really?
Because they do impressions of each other so well, but often at that point, by the time they come to the groups, obviously I've got an addiction problem anyway, and they often become under the dual diagnosis basis, where the services and the doctors and the GPs, etc., and the specialists will help to get the addiction under control, and then they can deal with the underlying issues. I know we've talked about that before. Mm-hmm. It's where you come in, isn't it? In many places, in many issues like that, with emotional issues and mental health issues.
Yeah. You've got to get hold of the addiction, because otherwise there's a limit to the amount of help that you can give someone all the time they're still using or drinking.
Yeah, it's an age-old problem, isn't it? Now, which drives which? Does a mental health issue drive your addiction, or does addiction drive the mental health issues? And they become inextricably linked, don't they? Because we know that people that can start off with a mental health issue, especially when you get these manic states, when you get these mood swings, self-medicate to calm the symptoms. And I think, often, it's a bit of an old phrase, I have a drink to calm down. At the end of the day, I like to have a drink, it calms me down, etc. And it does, and it's a problem. We know when that gets out of hand, we know where that can lead.
But do you think, in terms of that question, which came first, the mental health problem or the addiction? I mean, in the end, does it matter? Because they both need addressing.
They do both need addressing. I suppose it doesn't really matter, because they are entwined, and addiction can be seen as a mental health issue on its own, a standalone issue. Mm. So I think it's when it gets mixed up with something more serious like bipolar, where it can be a very distressing problem that you have. You've got to separate them out, haven't you? So you can deal with them.
Well, I mean, one of the things we were talking about before was the order in which you have to do things. So if someone's still in the throes of their addiction, they need to get that sorted out before they can really get any benefit from therapy. But I was thinking about that afterwards, and there is a kind of an exception to that, which is, and I can think of a few people that I've worked with that would fall into this category, but people who stop drinking or stop using or stop gambling, and then they go into therapy, and then while they're in therapy, they lapse. I wouldn't say to someone, "Oh, well, that's it. You can't come to therapy anymore because you've lapsed."
Okay.
Because I think that lapse is then part of. It has to become part of the therapy. Has to become part of the conversation that you're having with somebody. So
yeah,
I think I think it's important to make that distinction, that you can't. When someone lapses, that's the worst possible time. So you don't want to abandon them at that point, for them to feel, oh, that's great, I've lapsed now and everyone's abandoning me. All the help that I had is kind of disappearing.
It is very important, because we deal with that in a very similar way. When someone has a lapse, I think people, when they do come back into groups and have had a lapse, they think they're going back to day one, but you're not, are you? You've already had that period of sobriety under your belt. You've started to pick up some of the lessons, started to take hold of the tools that you need to go forward. And it'd be exactly the same in your position, wouldn't it? The work you've done with that person up to that point hasn't been lost. It's just it's just a wrinkle in the road, and you crack on with it after that. But people do think that one drink takes them right back to day one, which is a bit of a negative inflection upon it. We often talk about that in group, and you learn from it and you move on, and hopefully you don't make the same mistake again. But
I mean, you and I have spoken about that, and I think it's worth kind of just referencing that, because I can remember you saying something to me about that, which I thought, that's true, that's very important, which is that if you do lapse, so I don't know, if you've got 6 months, a year, 5 years sober and you lapse, it's important that you strike a balance between not destroying yourself because you have lapsed, not castigating yourself to such an extent that you feel like a complete loser. But it's also important not to let yourself completely off the hook, isn't it? You can't say, oh, it doesn't matter. I was 760 days in, so I'll just go 761 from tomorrow. You can't really do that. You have to kind of take a lapse seriously, don't you?
You can't minimise it. And I think that's the point. You've got to acknowledge it and you've got to move on from there. But we know that the more lapses you have, the worse it gets and the harder it gets to get straight again. So it can't be minimalised to an extent where it doesn't matter. But it can be, you've got to take the emotions out of it and say, well, this has happened. What do we do from here on in? How do we crack on now? And I think that's an important lesson of it as well, an important point, the lesson you learn from that. But it was when I was doing a bit of research on this, and I Googled impressions, obviously all sorts of things come up, right?
Mike Yarwood come up.
Well, that was exactly what did come up, okay? Because I was going to ask, if you hadn't come up with that name, I was going to say, who would be your favourite sort of impressionist from the sort of 70s and 80s?
Yeah, Mike Yarwood.
Yeah, Mike Yarwood. It's quite an interesting one because he had addiction problems, and it fell into what we're talking about today quite neatly, really.
Yeah.
He's a good impressionist, wasn't he? He used to do mostly the politicians, but he
wasn't that good, though, was he? That's part of the problem.
Well, he was massive. He had his own show and everything. He was very successful. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, he was. But one of the things about Mike Yarwood is when we used to watch him in the 70s, and as you say, he had his own show, it was like, oh, he's amazing. He sounds like all these people. But actually, in later years, people like Rory Bremner came along, you thought, oh, blimey, Mike Yarwood was rubbish, wasn't he? He wasn't very good at all. And I think I wonder if, I can't remember, maybe I'm making this up in my mind, but I've got a sense that his kind of fall from grace came at that sort of time when other people were coming through and showing that they were really quite talented impressionists. And it seemed to, everything seemed to fall apart for him.
It did. When you read his backstory, he was always crippled by nerves before performances anyway. Yeah. And he used to drink really heavily to overcome that. And that ended up costing him his marriage. And his career started to falter. And you're right, it was when other people come. It's the same with the music business anyway. It's trends. And there's, you can be involved in a super group, and the next minute someone else comes along that is better, selling more records, and you're knocked off of that perch very, very quickly. And I think that happened to him. So he did continue to drink, and it cost him everything, and until he had a heart attack, which it was diagnosed. That was part of the reason he had that was because of his lifestyle. But then he got help and he gave up completely. He gave up drinking completely. It was about 1991 he did that, and he's been sober ever since. So he's been 29 years sober now, which is
still alive.
He's 79 this year. So he gave it up at the age of 50, which is surprising how often that happens. Come across that a lot. It seems to be a bit of an age that you get to where your body is starting to disagree with your lifestyle, and you've got to do something about it. You're not as invincible as you once thought, and so it does seem to be an age that crops up quite a lot, and it happened the same with me. But
you're doing an impression of Frank Spencer.
Can I do one?
Yeah.
No, not really. No, I'm not very good at impressions. They're rather embarrassing, but I will come on to another story about that in just a moment, if you don't mind. I'm not going to do an impression, but we're going back to Mike. You are dragging me off my notes here a little bit. But so Mike Yarwood, he suffered his depression, and he went into the Priory, but he was able to get his diagnosis and get treated. And they told him it's because he was sober that they could do it so efficiently and effectively. Yeah. So again, I think that's an important point because he'd had a long time of sobriety behind him. When you go into recovery, you think all the world's going to be beautiful and everything's going to be right. It isn't. You're still going to get everything else that's going to impact upon the way you live and the way you behave. But you're able to deal with it so much better. I think it's a really important point there. Now, I was able to diagnose him quickly, get him sorted out, get him on a course of therapy, etc., and get him back straight because he didn't have anything else in the way of that diagnosis, which going back to our previous points, I think is quite important. But going back to, we're just talking about impressions. All right, there used to be a bit of a joke we used to play at home with myself and my two brothers. You might have been party to this, some. I don't know if you remember it, but my younger brother Paul and I, if we've ever were in a social situation and Russ was there as well, my older brother, we'd go around and tell people that Russ could do an impression of Alan Minter, the boxer, right? which he couldn't, right? But it was really funny because people then approach say, Russ, give us your Alan Minter. I've heard you can do a good Alan Minter. And it sort of got out of hand. It got out of hand, and it got to the point where everyone everywhere was going up to Russ. Even if we hadn't spoken to them, I said, Russ, do us an Alan Minter. So we used to enjoy that. We used to enjoy that a lot.
Why Alan Minter?
I don't know. It's quite a difficult one to do, I suppose. Or it was one that it wasn't a high-profile impression.
No, I don't know how you'd even begin to do an Alan Minter, really.
I know. Other people won't even know who he is now, will they? But so you could do whatever you like, probably.
He stopped me and asked me for directions in Chatham once.
Did he?
Yeah.
It wasn't Russ, was it?
No, I said, here, can you do a Russ Pankhurst for me? But he couldn't.
I mean, can you do an impression? I'll tell you, someone's doing an impression of you in the afterlife. He's Paul Kay, I reckon, the old psychiatrist. He's brilliant, isn't he? Is that how you behave with your clients?
Yeah, I don't think he's modelled his performance on me.
Oh, has he not?
No. No, that really is. I don't know. I mean, I've never read any interviews with Ricky Gervais about this, but I do wonder whether that perhaps says something about the way that he sees therapists.
I was just wondering whether it does your particular profession a disservice when you get that sort of thing portrayed.
I don't think it does the profession a disservice because it's such a lampoon, isn't it? It's cartoon-like. Yeah. I think if it were slightly nearer what could be considered reality, but it was a bit destructive, that would be different. But no, I mean, I can't imagine that. I can't imagine that any practicing therapists are like that.
Well, yeah, it's quite a genius interpretation of the profession, I've got to admit. But it does make me laugh. Whenever I see him sitting in the chair, it makes me think of you. I think that's what Graham's like with his clients.
I like his chairs, though. I do like his chairs. Although they don't look all that comfortable.
Do they not? I've never sat in a psychiatrist's chair. Well, not in yours, anyway.
I think a comfortable chair is important because if you're in therapy, you want to feel held, don't you? You want to feel emotionally held, but I think it's also quite important to feel physically held.
Yeah. Yes.
I can think of therapists that I've seen in the past, and I can remember how comfortable their chairs were. Maybe that just says something about me, but.
What better than yes, yeah, probably does. Yeah, it took your mind off what was going on. You didn't get anything from the meeting. You just thought, if I'm going to furnish my home, I know where I'm going to go next.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something in that because therapy is uncomfortable. So if you're going to be emotionally uncomfortable, it's probably quite important that you feel physically comfortable.
I suppose so, but there's some of the help I had when I was away in detox. The therapist there, I remember sitting on a stool on one occasion, which was really uncomfortable.
You were just being punished.
I think I was. It did feel like it at that point. Yeah, they're trying to thrash the addiction out of me.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, you were given the hard yards to do. I want to ask you a question about impressions before I let you go back to your notes.
Okay.
What was it? Yes. So you were talking about how people do, when you're drinking too much or whatever you're doing, you get into this habit of trying to do impressions of normality. Do you find that in recovery, do you notice ever people trying to do impressions of sobriety in recovery? Yeah,
you do, very much so, especially if someone has lapsed and doesn't want to say or doesn't want to let on. But I think you become very tuned in to it. As soon as you go into recovery yourself, you can spot a drinker a mile off. I can spot someone who's had a drink if they've had a quick half. Yeah. I can see the change in them. And they always say, you can't kid a kidder. And so if people come in and say, no, I'm all right, I haven't had a lapse, etc., and you can quite clearly, by their body language, especially if they've had a drink on the day when they bowled up to the meeting, you know straight away. But again, it's quite uncomfortable to watch people try to to do an impression of being sober at that point, especially amongst people that have been there and know exactly that.
Yeah. Isn't there also the other thing that's kind of allied to that is I can remember us having a conversation a long time ago about how, and this doesn't necessarily mean that someone's lapsed, but sometimes in recovery, in kind of peer support, people will really be talking a theoretically perfect game, which doesn't that sometimes stir a little bit of concern? You know, when people are really talking as if they've got all of their recovery completely sussed. Oh, it's totally under control. I know exactly what I'm doing. I mean, that when people talk like that in therapy, it always makes me think, hang on, you seem to be very anxious to convince me that everything's fine, and that always makes me think that probably everything isn't fine.
Yeah, that comes up. That does come up, and it's come up quite recently. But yeah, it comes up quite a lot when people have been in recovery perhaps for a long time and have had a string of lapses. Right. And to be honest, they do know the rules. They can recite verbatim. You know what the facilitator is going to be telling them as far as the advice is concerned. You know, going back to our mutual friend who has a heroin addiction, he said to me on many occasions, you know, I'll go into a meeting. I know exactly what they're going to say, so I'm not getting anything out of it particularly. All I'm thinking of is how quickly can I get out of here so I can go and get some more heroin. Yeah. And he could talk a good game. He could say, you know, if someone said to him, "What are you going to do next? What's your next step?" He could add a absolute. The patter was there, and it was perfect as to what he should be doing, and then he would ignore it. So there's a big leap between having these tools and using them.
Yeah.
And so it's an important point because that does crop up, and I think, you know, a lot of people, you know, I've had people come into groups that have done exactly that, but then admitted it and said, "Yeah, I know what I should be doing. You know, you're not telling me anything I don't know. I just got to go that next step and put it into practice." Yeah. Which is where the real hard work does begin. It's quite easy to read a textbook about something, and you know what you should and shouldn't be doing. But if you're just going to rattle it off like you're just putting down the answers in an exam room, it's not going to work. You've got to back it out into the real world and put it into practice.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much. I've come to the end of my notes. Really,
that's quite a good thing, really, because I was beginning to get a little bit concerned in the past couple of weeks that the length of our episodes is getting longer and longer. We're soon going to be up to kind of a feature film length if we're not careful.
It's no good, is it? We know what the ideal length of a podcast should be because people get bored, don't they?
Yeah. I get bored listening to you, so God knows what it's like for everybody else.
I've had enough already. You still there? I've had enough. I switched off a long time ago, mate. I'm just going on what I've learned in the past. I'm just trusting it out. Anyway, thank you very much for the bread this morning, which I, on my daily constitutional camera, picked it up off of your doorstep.
I didn't see you coming past. Did you peer in through the window?
Oh, I did peer in through the window, but I couldn't see Daisy. I couldn't see anyone.
Probably busy working, I expect.
You probably were because you can carry on working in your line of business quite easy during this lockdown, can't you?
And really, you must be getting a little bit tired of it by now.
I've had enough, but I'm still enjoying the walks out. I really enjoy that, the daily walks and exploring new places all the time. Okay. Anyway, thank you very much, sir. I'm going to get back to my cup of tea.
Yeah, it'll be cold, won't it, by now? Oh,
it is.
Yeah. Well, it's almost time for Pointless, isn't it?
It's going to be on soon, mate, isn't it? Yeah.
All right. Okay. See you next week.
Okay, I'll crack up. Yeah, take it easy.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Sideways was created by Graham Landy and Martin Pankhurst. If you want to read more about our work, visit grahamlandywellbeing.co.uk/sideways-podcast. You can follow us on Twitter, and you can email us to let us know what you think of the show or with any questions that you might have. And finally, we want to thank you for listening and ask that if you've enjoyed what you've heard, that you spread the word. And we'll see you next week.
Keep you in the dark, you know they all pretend. Keep you in the dark, and so again.